Yeah, so then let's start with the on-premise and self-hosted installation section. People might remember, based on version 15, 16 and early 18 trainings, this used to be the first chapter in the basic installation training, or the basic training overall. So from that perspective, that has been moved then, I think mid 2023, when they released the new trainings, where also the intermediate was gone into the advanced training. Yeah, so quickly jump on here. Okay. On-premise or self-hosted is for systems, for example, which have over 750 users. So if you have a customer who is by 700 users at the moment, and you have to deploy his system from a current traditional PBX system or what else ever to 3CX, you have to wisely think if you are going to deploy him on 3CX hosted, or if you straight away go to on-premise or self-hosted. It's just coming down to that if that customer is growing, you most likely will have to move the system to on-prem or self-hosted soonish when he reaches like 750 users. That, of course, can also be the case if you onboard a customer who is growing very fast. Unfortunately, we never know these cases at the beginning. So it's always that kind of juggle if you go straight away to self-hosted on-prem, or if you use hosted by 3CX, because we have that limitation there with maximum 750 users. When you have an on-prem or a self-hosted install, the admins are responsible for maintaining updates, for maintaining the server, for maintaining the network, monitoring, and correct firewall configuration. Of course, there is an ease of use when you use hosted by 3CX in that regard. 3CX is looking after that. On the other hand, you lose in certain ways control over the whole environment. You are also, when you use hosted by 3CX, you are forced, we saw that already on the basic training, you are forced to use the updates when they are released straight away. So you cannot prepare or wait for a certain time period until you lift the system to the next version. That is also including minor releases. So, for example, from, let's say, version 20 to version 20, update 1, update 2, and all that kind of stuff. This is just coming down if your customer has a system where he has older hardware or additional CRM kind of things that he uses with the system, and he requires to make changes in order to have the microcosmos still working. If the updates are applied straight away, you most likely, in these cases, your customer will face certain limitations, issues, which you can, in a way, handle better when you have an on-prem or self-hosted system. Again, you have more work, you have to maintain everything, but you also have the freedom of have access to everything in that regard. The hardware requirements, they are, you require a bare metal computer, a virtual machine, or hosting providers. In the regard of the bare metal machine, you find the specs on the 3CX website, which is lined out here on the bottom. You find that for all of these devices. Again, as mentioned already in the basic training, I will prepare a paper with a lot of links inside, which also includes those links from the slides, but also includes a lot of other links that are relevant. However, a lot of these links have changed recently regarding the changes that we had now from version 18 to version 20. So I have to go through all these links that I already have on that paper and update all those links. And then again, of course, that is no guarantee that in the future, these links that you then have on that PDF, that they will stay there or active forever. But it's just like that you have like a little library for a start, which is more or less up to date. Again, it can be that I add a link in there which is active by that moment where I start the paper, and then in the end, after maybe a week or so, when I had finally time to finish everything, that link is not available anymore. So that can happen. We know that all. Hosting providers, VM and bare metal machines, keep in mind when we go back here to, for example, 750 users or more, or even only 500 users, bear in mind to use a system that has enough specifications to be updated. Bare metal machine, in case you have to update the RAM, for example, that it has enough RAM already on board, or that you have the capacity to update. The same goes with virtual machine. Make sure that the host of the virtual machine allows the virtual machine to increase hardware specifications. And hosting providers, when you use your own hosting providers, ensure that you use a hosting subscription that allows you in the end to update the specifications of the machine, so that you do not have to use or literally reinstall the system, because the subscription that you have chosen for that hosting, that machine that is hosted on whoever, is not able to have additional RAM added or increase of uh, hard drive size and all that kind of stuff. So keep that in mind, especially since 3.6 is really a system that can increase seamless in the end, because it's software PBX that sits on an operating system. It is not bound to the operating system specifications in the end. Of course, we need, for the new one, we need Debian 12, and we use at the moment Windows 11, and we use Windows Server 19, and I think it's, what is it, 22 or 23. We look at that then afterwards. But it's just in the end, the only limitation that you have on the system is literally the boundaries that the hardware provides you. If you require more RAM, if you require a stronger CPU, whatever, and you don't have the capacity on the main board to increase that, you most likely will have to take a backup and restore the whole system on a new in a system, so on a new hardware, so either on a virtual machine on your hosting provider, or on a on a normal computer. So the limitation is given there. If you choose a device that has enough specifications, then you should be pretty fine for building up the system to a certain size. Again, of course, you never know how the customer is growing. Yeah. If it's a small business that says, yeah, I never want to go big, maybe, but who knows? Also, we know that Google started in a garage, Apple started in a garage. And how big are they now? Yeah. We have to stick to the minimum resource requirements that are lined out in the hardware specification. It can work on less than that, but again, there is no guarantee that it will work flawless and what else ever, and you limit yourself in the end. The resources depend on the use case. Call recordings, they go down to HDD size and speed. We have to see that call recordings are actually live recordings, and the more calls we have at the same moment, the more data is required to be written on a hard drive. So from that perspective, most likely SSD is the way to go. And then we require a certain size where the hard drive is actually storing those recordings. And per recording is generally 1 megabyte per minute of recording. That's generally the given size. The system can be installed on the following hosting providers and is available from their marketplaces. We have Amazon, AWS, and Lightsail, DigitalOcean, Google Cloud, Microsoft Azure, and Vultr. There is more or less a guide available. You choose in the marketplace that you want to use 3CX, and then you literally either upload a backup or you upload the configuration file that you create in the end in the 3CX backend. We see that on the on-prem install. On-premise installation, we use Linux Debian 12 meanwhile. You can download the 3CX ISO from the 3CX website for the bare metal machines, the local hypervisors, or hosting providers which do not have a 3CX marketplace image. So for example, if you have whatever kind of hosting provider which is not offering you a prepared image to install the latest 3CX version for the deployment, you have to use the 3CX ISO. Of course, you can also use a normal Debian 12 install and then choose apt-get and install or download the 3CX repository that way. However, it doesn't make much sense because in the 3CX ISO, which you can download on 3CX, you have everything included what you need for the 3CX installation. We have to be aware of that the Linux operating system has to be entirely dedicated to 3CX, so no other software to be running on there, no other software to be installed afterwards. No DNS, no VPN, and others. Windows operating system, we use at the moment either Windows 11 or Windows 10, 64-bit Pro or Enterprise release. Windows 10 most likely will be gone soon. So from that perspective, if you install it on Windows 11, just install it. If you install it on a Windows user operating system, install it on Windows 11. Windows Server, we have supported Windows 22, 19, and 2016. I would say if you install something new, try to avoid 2016, as this most likely is going to be cancelled soon. When you install it on Windows, ensure all Windows updates are applied prior, including all .NET updates. Windows system has to be free from third-party software, no DNS, no VPN installed. Running as a local VM, it can run on Microsoft Hyper-V, VMware, ESXi, KVM, Citrix Xen Server. Interestingly, I have to say now here, that we don't have anymore any versions lined out. From that perspective, we have to see what we have under these two links. Again, they will come in that guide that I am going to send you. It's just literally that we have, in the end, we used to have at least here, and here we used to have the version, and that used to be a very, very also here by the KVM actually. KVM we also used to be very common certification questions in that regard, yeah. But again, having no versions here doesn't mean that you can install it there on a very, very low version. That's definitely not going to work. Networking, LAN, we still have that part inside. If you install it on a local network, and it is always on a local network, even if it's hosted, because you are there on a local network behind the hosted firewall, again, the device there is the only device on that local network. You will have nothing else there except you are using a VPN that connects to that remote server or to that remote firewall. Else, on remote hosted, the device, the 3CX, will be the only device in a local network. But if you install it on premise, you have to ensure that it is a RFC 1918 compliant internal network. RFC 1918 is literally linking to the network IP ranges, for example. So we have an A, a B, and a C network, which has a certain IP range. You can look that up in the internet, which are the exact IP ranges. However, looking at that question, I'm 100% sure that this question still might be lurking around in the exams. There used to be two of those famous questions, and we look at them then on Friday when we have a chapter at the end where I try to show you what you actually have to read in the old questions, not in the new. I have not done the exam myself as well. I have not had time to do that. But there used to be in the old certification exam, there used to be questions which I will bring up so that you actually can understand what they were usually asking. Simplicity beats over engineering. One wired network interface, and the tonality lies here on wired. We do not use a phone system on a wireless connection. One wired Ethernet interface, one IP address with a static local IP address, and disable any unused adapters. However, I'm not sure if they are actually still lurking around, but there used to be setups, for example, with Telstra or others, where they came with the internet access or with the phone lines via a private network. And in that case, we literally required on the 3CX end, we required two network interfaces with two static IP addresses, and then we had to do static routing on the Windows or Linux machine. There is still a guide out there how to achieve that. However, I am not sure if these connections are still so very present. Split DNS, which requires a managed network. We create an A record on the DNS server. which points to the local LAN IP of the PBX. This allows failover setup. Apps now require a secure connection, even internally. The prerequisites, we have to have a configurable internal DNS server, and we have to have a configurable internal DHCP server. So I did install the example that we will see then in a couple of minutes. I did that on a basic router where I created a hairpin net. We will look then afterwards on that. When I went to the web GUI of the 3CX using the local IP address, I had a red bar at the top lining out that the connection is not secure, and yeah, phones will not register that way and all these kind of things. On the WAN side, we require a configurable firewall. We need to have the knowledge on how to configure. So not we, you need to know how to configure your own firewall. It is achievable to have static IP address on the WAN side, disable any HTTPS proxies on the firewall also, and also disable all SSL deep inspections. This is just causing issues for the audio traffic, and also can avoid extensions to actually register. In case your customer uses ACLs, so he limits the outbound traffic or controls the outbound traffic on who is allowed to go where, the following links have to be allowed to be reached by the 3CX server: activate.3cx.com, downloads-global.3cx.com, wmr.3cx.net, and the MCU servers. There is the more in the next chapter, configuring the firewall. Now, external FQDN. The external FQDN is a great idea in order to have always the same address that can be reached. So if the IP address changes, for example, if the customer changes the hosting provider, or if he has the system on premise and he changes his internet service provider, his IP address will change. But since the FQDN resolves to the IP address and we connect to the FQDN, the system will always be reachable under the old or the new IP address. Now, the FQDN is also required for working with certificates. Certificates do not work with IPs, therefore we require an FQDN. Now, if you use a split DNS, if you use a managed domain, you can use your self-signed certificates. However, you will have to maintain them yourself. You are not allowed, more or less, to forget that they expire, else you will run into issues. Can be that all of a sudden the phones are not working anymore since the certificates expired. What you also have to do in that regard, you have to ensure that the browsers or IP phones have those certificates updated regularly when you use your own certificates. With 3CX, if you use a, let's say, 3cx.com.au, so .com ni.3cx.com.au domain, then 3CX takes care of that. The certificates are delivered on a monthly basis. They are automatically inbuilt to browsers and IP phones. So from that perspective, you don't have to worry about that. Now, there is always the discussion why running a system on static versus dynamic IPs. It's coming down to the availability and reachability, which in the end comes then down again to DNS resolution. So think about if you have a mobile phone or a street address or what else ever, where people know you're reachable under that and they can call you there. And all of a sudden you have a dynamic address or you have a dynamic phone number and people don't find you anymore because your phone number is changing like every week or what else ever. Yeah. So from that perspective, it is better to have a static because you're always reachable under the same destination. There are ways, of course, to have the DNS resolution or that the system is going to resolve and change the IP address behind the FQDN as soon as it changes. But first of all, this comes down to the license we have. So Pro versus Enterprise. Enterprise is changing faster because the change of the IP address, if we use a dynamic on an enterprise solution, the change of the IP address is actively pushed from 3CX to Google. On a Pro, it's not pushed to Google. Okay, so now we know Google can be pretty fast. However, there are other DNS servers underneath there. Yeah, comes down to what your ISP uses and all that kind of stuff. So if there is a DNS server that is not renewing the DNS entries fast, so for example, they do that on a 24 hours level, we can that stuff can be pushed to Google pretty fast, but then here it will not update it for 20. It will not be updated for 24 hours or based on when the last run was, so can be 15 hours or 10 hours. So which means your phones, your customers' phones who try to reach the FQDN, they will run to the old IP address, yeah. By the Pro, it is first of all not actively pushed to Google, so it takes roughly already like 2 hours until it is generally picked up by Google, and then we will literally go the same flow again. So it can be quite a lot of a delay in that regard. So it can have a big impact on your customer side if you are using dynamic versus static. Further down the track, what we have faced in the past, that sometimes customers, they have their own DNS server on site, so in the building, and that DNS server on site is not updating the entries. And in that regard, then the customer's IT would actually have to manually refresh those entries of the dynamic IP address. So you can see it's quite a mixture of issues that you can have if you use dynamic IPs versus static IPs. If you use a 3CX domain service, you get a free public FQDN, you get free trusted SSL certificate, and as I just said before here, you get support for dynamic IPs. However, it comes then down to what solution or what DNS servers are there in the back. Time for a demo. Now let me quickly get those videos that I prepared. Bear with me very quickly. So regarding the videos, I'm not able to demo you a hosted solution. The point is I don't have a hosting access at the moment, but it's generally running the same way. I tell you then from when on, it's not the same anymore. However, to install the ISO then again on the host is for you then when you do it via the host easier because that is done more or less all in the back end. Okay, so I log in now here into the 3CX portal. I go to my systems and then I choose quickly one of the systems that are available. And you see I choose the Breeze Connect, which is green there. That's because I have already played around with this one. That is an enterprise NFR license, and you see, can I use that? No, I can't use the pencil here. You see, we can switch it to hosted. That would switch it then or use the install deployment on 3CX hosted, or I can install it because it was not up and running. So we install it. And here we see now I cannot choose 363, 3CX SMB because, of course, they are requiring a different license key. But I can use it for 3CX hosted, or I can use it for 3CX self-hosted on-premise, which I'm going to do now. I, in that very moment, quickly move over to a notepad and copied the host name or FQDN that I will use. And you see, I choose the 3CX domain, 3cx.com.au. You see also here, you have a tick box where you can choose use your own SSL and FQDN certificate. In that regard, then you would have to choose your own domain. We go now to next, and we choose the digits. I mentioned that already in the basic when we came to 3CX hosted on 3CX SMB and free. We don't have the opportunity to choose the extension range on 3CX hosted and on self-install, so self-hosted or on-premise. We have the opportunity to choose the extension range, the extension length. Now, you remember at the beginning of the session, I said we choose wisely on what you choose for the hardware that can run under the system, because the system can grow. In that regard, also here, choose wisely, choose here even wiser, because you cannot change the digit length anymore once you are going or once the system is deployed. Not that you get me wrong and think, that the system or the digit length is bound to the key. That's not the case. But when you have a system running and you chose 3 digits and all of a sudden you need, because the customer has more extensions, more users or whatever kind of setup, he needs 4 digits. You have to recreate the system from scratch, absolutely from scratch. Yeah. There are some ways that you can export certain CSV files and all that stuff. That kind of stuff that can ease your work, but generally the whole system will have to be rebuilt from scratch. There is no way that you can say, when you have a 3-digit system, that you can say, okay, now we literally tick somewhere a box or we do change something on the running system and we go to 4 digits. That's not working. So you have to shut down the system, take the license key and rebuild from the beginning. Yeah. And of course, the bigger the system is, the more complex that whole rebuild is. So you would not want to go down that path. So choose wisely. I always choose 4 digits, but that is also coming from the time when we had every extension that was newly created was 000. So I advise their people to literally avoid that extensions have the 000 on the system, which I have seen many. And we all know what the 000 is here in Australia. But it also, 4-digit gives you the opportunity to create a system where you have a couple of thousand users on it. Yeah. Okay. Go further. We choose next. Then we choose the area, the time zone. We choose the correct prompt sets, and then we go ahead. We choose here the platform. Just a little bit back. We choose here the platform, and now you would then see when we go to Amazon, Lightsail, Google, Azure, whatever, it would, from there away, it would take a separate pathway, which I cannot show you at the moment as I have no account on those backends. Yeah. Windows, I have not chosen to show you a Windows install because there is no final version of version 20 on Windows available yet. So therefore, we are going to use Linux. As you can see, we have a version 18 and a version 20. You see now here the download link links to Debian 10 ISO, while when I click on version 20, it will change. You see it links to the folder Debian 12 ISO. Well, I quickly want to show you again here. If I go back quickly, one moment, I want to show you something else. Oops. Quickly let that run again. Do that again. Also, what's changing is the link, the login link. You see on the version 18, behind the FQDN, you have the web client, because under normal circumstances, we would use the FQDN to access the management console. You remember with version 18, we had the management console that came up with the direct link, and we had to use the web client, the subfolder in the web server for accessing the web client. Actually, with version 20, we only have the web client, so it is literally the whole, it is literally the whole FQDN that brings us now to the web client, which is the administration console. Now, what you saw before, I downloaded or clicked on the download link for the 3CX ISO, and you see already it's literally the third ISO that I download. You see the 2 in brackets, so that would be the one without additional ending, then there would be the 1, and now it's the 2. I do that first of all to show you how to download, and second, I didn't check when I downloaded the other ones, and therefore it might be that one could be a version 18 and the other one could be an older version of that. Now also here, we then, once we start with the installation of the 3CX, or when we actually are configuring the system, the initial setup, we have to either upload a backup or we have to upload a config file or enter a URL of a config file. I will show you then further down the path what we are going to do. Now we download that file. We also copy that URL in order to actually have that URL also present. We copy the username and we copy the password of the user that we create. Now, that is the config file what you downloaded when you create a 3CX. I'm going to do some changes on there in order to have the system running properly. Depending on the setup you do, you also will have to make changes. Now, you see, when you look into that config file, you see that we have at the very top, we have the public IP automatically recognized. So it's not something that we say we give here a IP address fixed inside there. And then we define if it's a static or a dynamic IP address, and we defined that it's a static IP address. Then the local IP address, we do not look at it, need FQDN, and the answer is yes. Host name, that's the host name. The DNS suffix is AU, the domain group is Oceania, has local DNS, at the moment is set to no, which I leave to no because I just installed that on a flat network. Now, there comes the important part here, HTTPS port 443. Since I did that recording from home, I have a normal network at home where literally everyone who uses the internet with a browser or what else ever uses 443. And the same situation you most likely face if you install the system on-prem. And don't forget that is now the demo for the on-prem installation. And it's also coming down to remember when I was by the RFC 1918 slide before, when I said hosted, you don't have to worry because the 3CX is the only device that is there in that local network that is on the hosted provider. But if you do it on-prem, you have many, many, many other devices that actually use the port 443 for HTTPS. So since we have to do port forwarding to literally have the management console reached, and also for web meetings and for updates and all that kind of stuff. Don't forget also over HTTPS we have the the availability, so that you can see who is on the call and all that stuff. That is all going via HTTPS. Now, if I on the firewall say forward port 443, which is the default port for HTTPS, to the IP address of the 3CX, every browser request from a user, whatever, will be redirected to the 3CX, and no cost or no user in that local network will be able to use 443 anymore. Therefore, I have to change 443 to whatever I want to use. In this case, I use the old traditional 5001 port. However, this means then again that in the future, when I want to access the web client or whatever, I have to use 5001 again, or whatever port I decided there to reach the web client. Yeah. We see also here we have the opportunity to change the SIP port. If we don't want to use 5060, we can also use something else, and we can also change the tunnel port. However, in this case, we only change the HTTPS port. I save that then. See, there's a lot of more information inside there. I just run quickly through all that stuff. Oh, yeah, sorry. I also change the initial number of the first extension. The reason we will see then when we come to bridges. The difference now with what we had in the setup of version 18 is we are not going through a wizard anymore where I can choose how the number has to start with. We do that all in the config file. So all changes that we need to do on the system to have the system initially set up properly, we do in the config file now here. Yeah. So since I have a hosted system already from the basic training, where I use the first extension, or the extension range starts with 1000, then 1001, 1002, and so on. I don't want to use the same range anymore here. You will see that then when I come down to bridges. So in this case, I have to change the first, or the starting extension number and then change everything that has 2000 or 1000 instances. So you see also here the first extension is always the operator. I have to change that as well. Now I have changed that all. I have changed also the HTTPS port. Now I should be fine, except I want to do any other changes. And then we do Control S, and we have that thing saved. In the meantime, also the ISO has been downloaded. We see that up there at the top right. The ISO is down now, so we can actually start with the installation of the system. I use here a VirtualBox, which is not supported, but it works for doing a demo on it from that perspective. I change the hardware settings a little bit, give it a little bit more processors, also increase the hardware size. Then further down, I go to settings, and since I have a Mac-based IP address assignment, I give the 3CX there always the same MAC address so that I don't have to change anything on the router. Here I go to bridge adapter, and then I literally change the MAC address. So that's generally the basic setup of the device that I do, and then I say generally start. Then we will see that installing 3.6 on using Linux is not really that much faster than installing it on Windows. Still have to install the basic operating system and all that kind of stuff. So I do a little bit fast forwarding here in the actual video. On the normal circumstances doesn't go really that fast. So it's taking its time. The video would be actually much longer if I would have included no fast forwarding. So we give it there a host name. Then we give it a domain name. Again, I install it on a flat network, so it does not really matter much in that regard. Then we choose the installation language. We choose our location, which is Australia. And then we choose the key map. In my case, this is a different one than the American English, but that's just literally to be able to use my 700 keyboards I have at home. Now, root password, of course, I use pretty stupid one now here, but that's just for the ease of the installation. You, of course, have to use a pretty secure one there that is for the root. That 3.6 system is not running anymore, so from that perspective, yeah. Now we choose the time zone of the basic system, and now we literally prepare the partitioning, probably everything wrong, but I am not a Linux man. So from that perspective, yeah. If you are also not a Linux person, use Windows. Do not use a system you can't support in the worst case. And if you are a Linux person, sorry, forgive me that I just clicked straight through. But yeah, it is what it is. Again, we are fast forwarding here. I had to use for that install with Linux a different router than the one I usually use. Since version 18 Linux, for whatever reason, I didn't have time to really dig into the reason why. But since version 18, the Linux, that was Debian 10, would not be able to connect to the server, to the 3CX server, or not to the Linux server. Actually, I do not even get that far via my Sophos firewall. For whatever reason, don't ask me. Was working prior. Now, since version 18, so since they used Debian 10, would not connect, would not be able to get out to the update server from Debian anymore. Don't know why. But again, for that is the router that I had in use is fine enough. Now here we come to the definition page or the decision page, not the definition, the decision page, where we decide if we install a 3CX phone system or if we install a 3CX SBC. Yeah. So until here, the installation path of installing a 3CX phone system or an SBC is absolutely the same. So we could choose here now, use a 3CX or use the SBC. And then, of course, we go further with tab and choose, we choose 3CX and go ahead with tab and now we actually receive the files for 3CX. We accept the license agreement. This is usually done using the tab button or something like that, and then the enter. Okay, and now we come to the decision page. Do we run the configuration tool using a web browser or from the command line? You know that already. That has been introduced by 3.6. I think it was version 15 or 15.5. We know that already, and we, in this case, press 1. And with the Windows solution, we usually have then automatically the browser that opens. With the Linux version, we have to just enter the IP address and the port 5015 into it. You will see that port then again in a couple of minutes when we look into the firewall configuration. Bear in mind that we have to use HTTP and not HTTPS, since the system has no certificate yet. So from that perspective, we are doing that at the moment with an old HTTP connection, and the port 5015 is only used during the next step where we literally configure the system, and after that the port 5015 is not of any use anymore unless we want to reinstall the system again. Okay, now we have here the 3CX, the new version 20 3CX start page of the configuration tool, and we see that we do not have anymore the option to enter a license key. We have the option to upload a configuration file or to restore a backup, but we can't build up a system from scratch that way anymore by just entering here the license key. We go next, and now you remember at the beginning we had the opportunity to copy a link or to download that configuration file. Now, since I had to make adjustments to that file, I cannot use the link that I copied, because the link that I copied would use 443 as HTTPS port, and it would include the extension number 1000, which I changed to 2000. Yeah, so from that perspective, I have to use the file I created or adjusted. I'm uploading now that file. It waits for the activation server to start the FQDN activation. Again, here I did fast forward that section a little bit, else we probably still would be sitting here by tomorrow and watching that movie. It's a little bit, yeah, overly expressed, but still. So we see now here, we have the username, we can set the password with clicking on that link. We have the public IP, we have the FQDN, and we have the serial number or the license key. We have that in that picture. And now, if we use 443, because I did not add 5001 here in the back, I only used a HTTPS port, a normal HTTPS, which is 443, I'm not getting to the page. And of course, I'm using 5001, yeah, because I have a whole network behind me here where I cannot use 443, else everyone else can't use it anymore. And we come to the login page. Then we enter either the extension number or the email address that is assigned to that account. And we are literally logged in. You can go to the admin page, and then we literally see everything that is built up there.